Breaking news has shaken Hollywood. Clifton Powell's sentence is final. From a tough childhood in Southeast D.C. to blockbuster roles in Friday and Ray, Powell built a name that fans knew everywhere. But scandals, shocking accusations, gambling, divorce, and discrimination nearly destroyed everything. Was this the end of a career or the start of a darker truth that Hollywood never wanted you to hear? The final verdict is here, and it changes everything. Let's find out! Breaking news out of Hollywood has stunned fans and industry insiders alike. ABC has reported that Clifton Powell's sentence is final, and the announcement has left many wondering if one of the most recognizable faces in film is now facing the end of his career. Clifton Powell is a name you may not immediately recognize, but his face is unforgettable. For more than 3 decades, he has appeared in film after film, building a reputation as one of Hollywood's most reliable character actors. His breakthrough came in 1993 with Menace II Society, a gritty urban drama that captured the harsh realities of street life. Powell's role in that film earned him attention for his raw energy and ability to bring authenticity to the screen. Soon after, he became a familiar presence in the Friday series, where his sharp timing and comedic delivery made him a fan favorite. Powell had range that few could match, moving seamlessly from hard-edged dramas to light-hearted comedies, proving that he could inhabit almost any role he was given. By 2004, Powell had cemented his reputation when he appeared in the critically acclaimed biopic Ray, starring Jamie Foxx. His performance was so strong that it earned him a nomination for an NAACP Image Award, placing him in the spotlight alongside some of Hollywood's most respected actors. Along the way, he appeared in films such as Dead Presidents, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, Rush Hour, and Next Friday, each time leaving an impression that audiences carried with them long after the credits rolled. Over the years, Powell amassed more than 100 credits across film and television, becoming the man Hollywood called when they needed someone unforgettable. Whether it was a villain, a father figure, a hustler, or even a cop. What made Powell unique was not just the volume of work he took on, but the versatility he displayed across genres and styles. He had the ability to terrify with a menacing glare, to deliver humor with perfect timing, and to ground a dramatic scene with quiet, emotional depth. This versatility earned him the respect of directors, casting agents, and audiences alike, building a career that most actors could only dream of. Yet for all of his professional success, Powell's personal and professional journey was far from smooth, and the news of his so-called final sentence now forces us to look at both the triumphs and the troubles that have defined his life in Hollywood. How could a man who worked so hard to climb from obscurity to recognition, who survived the harsh streets of Southeast Washington, D.C., and turned his life into a Hollywood story, now find himself at the center of a breaking news bulletin that sounds like the end of the road? The contrast between success and downfall has rarely been so stark. On one hand, Powell was the actor who seemed to be everywhere, appearing in blockbuster films and cult classics alike. On the other hand, his off-screen struggles and controversies were mounting, creating a parallel story that was far less glamorous than the red carpets and flashing cameras suggested. This is why the announcement of his final sentence carries such a powerful weight. It is about an entire career being put under the harshest light imaginable. Hollywood has seen many scandals before, but this case raises the question, when the industry and the public make up their minds, can a man ever truly recover? Newly resurfaced details confirm that Clifton Powell's long-running legal battle, which first began more than a decade ago, has now been finally settled, with no criminal charges upheld. For years the story was whispered about, but only now is the full picture clear. A man once known for his commanding presence in over 100 movies found himself brought to his knees. But the most disturbing part of this saga is how much damage had already been done long before the courts made their decision. How does an allegation with no proven foundation nearly destroy the career of a man who fought so hard to build his life? And more importantly, what does this say about the power of public opinion in the world of entertainment? The ordeal began in the late summer of 2011 when a woman using the pseudonym Keontae Myers came forward with shocking accusations against Powell. According to her claims, an encounter in a hotel room in New Orleans crossed a line, beginning as consensual and then becoming, in her words, too aggressive to continue. She alleged that when she asked him to stop, he ignored her request and carried on regardless. Myers, who at the time worked as a cocktail waitress at Harrah's Casino, filed a complaint that quickly spread to the press. Outlets such as TMZ picked it up, reporting on the incident in blunt headlines that left little room for nuance or interpretation. For Powell, the sudden shift was devastating. Overnight, the actor who had made audiences laugh in Friday and moved them in Ray was being painted in an entirely different light, with his name linked to one of the most serious allegations a man can face. From the very beginning, Powell denied the claims unequivocally. Through his representative, he issued a statement declaring that the accusations were false and that he intended to pursue every possible legal remedy against the woman who had made them. Yet once such allegations enter the public sphere, the damage begins immediately. Even though the original criminal investigation was dismissed for lack of evidence, the headlines did not vanish. Myers later pursued a civil case against Powell, seeking financial damages in excess of $75,000. This meant that even without a criminal conviction, Powell would remain entangled in a legal fight that could drag on for years, forcing him to defend not just his freedom but his reputation. The civil case became the center of Powell's life, taking up time, money, and emotional energy. Unlike criminal court, where the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, civil cases operate on what lawyers call a preponderance of evidence. This means that rather than proving guilt to near certainty, the question becomes whether it is more likely than not that the accusation is true. For celebrities, this creates an especially dangerous environment because even the suggestion of wrongdoing can be enough to taint careers, regardless of what the courts eventually decide. Powell understood this clearly, telling interviewers later that the worst part was not the legal process itself, but the erosion of trust, the loss of work, and the realization that many people had already made up their minds. Hollywood is not known for its patience or loyalty when scandal erupts. The entertainment industry, worth billions, relies heavily on reputation and public image, and studios are quick to distance themselves from any actor whose name becomes controversial. For Powell, the impact was immediate. Roles he had already secured began to vanish. Producers grew hesitant, not wanting to risk negative press. Television appearances that once seemed guaranteed for Powell were suddenly taken away, often after just a few episodes. He remembered one particular show where he had been told to expect 7 or 8 appearances, only for his role to vanish after the second. The only explanation he ever received was the shadow of allegations hanging over him. While the financial losses were devastating, the emotional toll was far greater. Powell described this period as the most painful experience of his life since the death of his father decades earlier. As a father himself, the accusations cut especially deep, not just for what they implied, but for how his own children might see him in the wake of such headlines. Though he never wavered in maintaining his innocence, he could not shield his family from the whispers, the rumors, and the doubts that seemed to follow them everywhere. Walking down the street, he often caught suspicion in the eyes of strangers. Online, anonymous voices declared him guilty long before any court considered the evidence. In an industry where perception often outweighs truth, Powell found himself condemned by the court of public opinion. The civil case dragged on for 4 long years, casting its shadow over every aspect of Powell's life. He fought to keep his career afloat while simultaneously holding his personal life together, even as lawyers and judges dissected the details. In 2017, the case was thrown out for lack of evidence. A year later, Powell's own counterclaims for defamation and emotional distress were also dismissed, bringing the matter to a legal close. Yet victory brought little relief. Though the courts had cleared him, Hollywood had not. This, Powell later reflected, was the essence of his tragedy. The final sentence he carried was not a criminal conviction, but the loss of reputation. In a world where perception can be more powerful than fact, mere accusations became the punishment. The reality is clear. Clifton Powell was never convicted of a crime. Yet his career tells a different story. Roles dried up, trust evaporated. The steady momentum that had made him one of Hollywood's most dependable performers vanished. The case consumed critical years of his professional life, years he could never regain. His experience underscored one of Hollywood's harshest truths. Sometimes the perception of guilt weighs heavier than actual evidence. Even though the case was dismissed, it left behind a scar that never fully healed. Powell's struggles in Hollywood were not limited to his legal troubles. He also faced systemic discrimination that had long plagued the industry. He has spoken openly about how casting decisions often ignored his talent or professionalism and instead focused on the shade of his skin. On more than one occasion, producers and executives dismissed him outright, calling him too dark for the role, and in one particularly stinging moment, claiming he was so dark he might scare viewers. Repeated rejections of this kind left Powell questioning whether his years of training and hard-earned reputation even mattered when his complexion was the first thing people noticed. Hollywood has long operated on the belief that marketability is tied to relatability, and relatability has often been defined by how closely an actor fits Eurocentric beauty standards. In practice, this meant that darker-skinned actors were frequently shut out of leading roles, especially in romance-centered stories or roles requiring the audience's empathy. Powell's skill was undeniable, but systemic preferences placed him at a permanent disadvantage, one that no amount of work could erase. The contradiction was glaring. He was praised for his ability to embody gritty, intimidating, or menacing characters, but when roles demanded vulnerability, charm, or sensitivity, his skin tone was suddenly framed as a barrier. This double standard restricted his growth, confining him to certain archetypes and depriving him of opportunities that could have reshaped his image in the public eye. Worse still, it reinforced the misperceptions that haunted him during his legal battles. Since audiences were already used to seeing him portray darker, morally complex figures, Powell's frustration extended beyond the casting room. Within the black entertainment community itself, he noticed a troubling trend of public criticism directed at one another in mainstream outlets that already undervalued black artistry. At one point, he clashed with director Spike Lee after Lee made comments about another black actor that Powell felt were unnecessarily harsh. Powell responded publicly, saying he could not respect anyone, including himself, his son, or his daughter, who would attack a fellow black entertainer in crossover press when that person was simply trying to succeed. For Powell, unity was crucial. Tearing one another down only reinforced the systemic barriers they were already fighting against. This determination to stand firm, despite obstacles, made his NAACP Image Award nomination for his performance in Ray particularly meaningful. The recognition was not just about a single role. It was validation that his contributions mattered despite Hollywood's biases. In the film, Powell portrayed Jeff Brown, the devoted road manager of Ray Charles, delivering a nuanced performance alongside Jamie Foxx's Oscar-winning role. The nomination showed that his work could not be overlooked, even in an industry that often marginalized actors like him. Yet the broader reality remained unchanged. Opportunities for darker-skinned actors were scarce, and Powell's career bore the marks of that bias. Often, the prejudice was subtle, wrapped in phrases like market concerns, target demographics, or creative vision. These terms sounded neutral but frequently concealed discriminatory choices. For Powell, the battle was not just to land roles, but to be given an equal chance at all. Behind the Hollywood persona, Powell's personal life was shaped by hardship from the beginning. Growing up in Southeast Washington, D.C., he faced an environment defined by crime, poverty, and limited opportunity. When he was just 4 years old, his mother died, leaving him with a father who struggled with alcoholism and could not provide the stability a child needs. Powell described those years as a constant fight to avoid trouble, surrounded by peers who were pulled into crime and often ended up in jail, or worse. Survival depended on the mentors and relatives who stepped in to keep him from being consumed by the streets. Though Powell escaped his difficult upbringing with discipline and determination, the scars of loss and instability followed him into adulthood. He married Kimberly Powell and worked to create a stable home of his own, but the relentless demands of Hollywood strained the marriage. Constant travel, long hours, and the temptations of fame tested his commitment, and eventually the relationship collapsed. The divorce devastated him both emotionally and financially. By his own admission, he lost $5 million in the process. For a man who had spent decades building financial security, the loss was crippling, forcing him to rebuild at an age when many of his peers were already settling into retirement. Powell later acknowledged the mistakes that contributed to the breakdown of his family life. He admitted he had been too absent from his children's lives, confessing, "I wasn't there for my children like I should have been." While he had provided for them financially, his physical absence and emotional distance left a void that money could never fill. Being away half the time might have been survivable, he reflected, but being gone 70% of the time was simply too much. The realization came too late to save his marriage or ease the strain on his children, but it highlighted the human cost of chasing success under Hollywood's relentless spotlight. Like many others in the industry, Powell also fell prey to its temptations. He admitted to heavy gambling, sometimes losing between $30,000 and $50,000 a year at casinos. While those numbers might seem manageable for a wealthy actor, they added up quickly, worsening the financial instability already caused by his divorce. He also spoke openly about the shallow relationships that surrounded him, women and so-called friends who stayed close only because of what he could provide. This lifestyle of constant spending and fleeting connections created a spiral that left him vulnerable and increasingly unstable. Decisions that seemed exciting in the moment often only deepened his struggles in the long run. The contrast in Powell's life grew increasingly sharp. To the public, he was a successful actor, appearing in films and television series seen around the world. On screen, he came across as powerful, confident, and commanding. But behind the scenes, he was battling financial losses, a broken marriage, and the weight of regret. The glittering facade of Hollywood success masked a personal reality that was fragile and uncertain. And when the accusations of 2011 hit, that hidden fragility made him all the more exposed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.